I think that there's method and content. The method of organizing is about building democracy. It's about engaging in activities that develop leadership. It's about developing a capacity in a community to make decisions for itself that reflect the interests of the community and have a sense of pluralism, that we can argue back and forth about what we want, but we respect that all of those possibilities are valid because they come out of our experience, and they're not somebody over there telling our community what we should be and what we should have, how our kids should be treated or taught. There is knowledge maybe outside of our community. We want to bring that in, but we own this process. That's kind of the most localized, pure democracy.
And so I think that so there's kind of three elements to it of like, here's how you change it, because we believe organizing changes things. Here are the systems that are oppressive, and here's the historical and current context of that. And then also, like, every day you're faced with it, and how do you deal with that? And push young people and even ourselves every day to just be stronger and move forward. It's like I look at some of our campaigns and I'm like, I have no idea how we're going to win this one. And it's like you prepare yourself, like, but you're going to fight like hell to get there. But you're like, this is like large, and it's like even hard for adults. Like, how are we going to tackle this? The school district just announced that they're going to close 40 schools, and they're going to restructure the district in ways that, the New York model, which hasn't worked. And you're looking at this huge system and all that private entities and, public entities that are fueling it. And you're like, God, how are we going to win this? And so, it's like, I think collectively provide that strength for each other. Like, we can defeat this, and we can move forward. And even if we're just chipping away at it, in the long term, we are creating change. You don't prepare young people for defeat, but I think you put things in a historical context, right? So if you look at movements, over time, in a period of time in history, changes have been made. And those changes have been made through organizing. And if you're constantly reminded about that history and that tradition, it sits with you and it resonates with you, and that you might lose a battle, but you're not necessarily going to lose the war, right? And so, that defeat's real. It can be very real at times, but you just keep pushing and you keep pushing, and it's about building a faith and a belief that organizing works and organizing does change things. And if you believe that, then change will happen. Like, then those defeats aren't as bad. Like, that's going to happen. We're working against very powerful systems that are meant to hold us down. And so not every protest, not every meeting, not every negotiation is going to be a victory. But you come back and you figure it out, and you figure out how to build more power, and then you go back at it. When we built this high school across the street, Kensington Kappa, I can't tell you how many times we had to fight to get that school built. This year will be the 10-year anniversary of that struggle. And to this day, we're still fighting to keep it small, and we're still fighting to keep it neighborhood-based, because they want to make it a magnet school, because now it's made AYP and it's doing really good. And so it's a consistent struggle, and it gets tiring, yeah. But the successes are very real, too. I mean, we have this huge building that's the only LEED Platinum high school in the country. It's won many awards. It's in our community, and it made AYP, and it's successful. So those victories are real. The other thing was interesting is that YUC had been working on these like one-year issue campaigns for a really long time. So we'll fight for a counselor, and then the new principal comes, and that counselor goes away. We'll fight for in-school suspension, there's budget cuts, and it goes away. And so we thought that our campaign should last a year. You start the year, you do a listening campaign, you do your research, you do your issues, negotiation, boom, big victory, you win, and the next year you start all over again. But when we started looking at real whole school transformation, our campaigns lasted 7-8 years. And we were really nervous that we would lose young people, but the opposite happened. And not only did we not lose young people, we had higher retention rates, we had larger chapters, and the alumni continuously come back now because they want to see the fruits of their labor, right? And the passing of the torch is so much stronger than it was before, because it's like, we started this campaign, you're carrying it on.
Monica invited me to the first meeting. I was actually very hesitant to go. You know, I didn't know what all that was about. But at the first meeting, you know, when you see other students just like you that want to see something change and really believe that as students we are the solution, and it opened my eyes that we all have a very important voice, and if it's not us as people directly affected by these problems, then who's going to stand up for us if we don't stand up for ourselves and for our community? And that first exposure to organizing happened at that meeting led by youth, other students that were going to high school, and were seeing the same issues and living through the same conditions that I was going through. And being around them really impacted me to feel empowered and feel support.
I think that there have been a number of studies that have really documented the profound impact that participation in youth organizing can have on young people. You know, young people who are often, you know, alienated from our mainstream institutions like schools can find a place where they can work together with other people and really not just address the problems they are facing by improving schools or improving their community, but sort of come to become agents of change in their own lives and in their own communities. So building their knowledge and skills, but building their sort of sense of self-confidence, building their sense of responsibility to a community. It's really about the creation of, you know, growing into, you know, a meaningful and engaged adult. And we have very few spaces, I think, for young people to do that. And I think organizing groups are one of those.
The skills I definitely think is like the research skills, that definitely like honing down on the knowledge and basically like being educated on what you're talking about and like what's going on, because that's really important. I remember one of my first meetings in PSU that I went to was with Dr. Arlene Ackerman, and like just me being in that meeting with her down in the district and like her just like shutting us down, like, oh, you don't know this and you're not educated on this. It really like gave you like the energy and like the motivation to be like, well, I need to do my research because I don't really want to be embarrassed like that again. And it was definitely like the research part and like knowing your knowledge, and then like the public speaking and like the networking and be able to talk to people and like voice your opinion and voice your thoughts clearly so that you like people can understand you was like a real big aspect of it. But this also about just like doing different media outlets, such as like being interviewed or like doing radio and like writing your own pieces, so you have like different components of being an organizer. It's like, well, you could be a good strategy person and you could like really be good behind the scenes, but also you just being able to write and speak and voice out like what you're doing and how you're doing it is like one of the main things too.
I think there's some really interesting stuff that we're learning now about young people's engagement in organizing and what it does for their sense of civic life and the way that they see themselves in that realm, plus, you know, in educational contexts and interpersonal. But really, you know, we're talking about kids who are likely to be the least engaged, the least likely to vote, the least likely to, you know, go to a city council hearing or, you know, any of those things that we think of as the basics of being a part of a democracy. So if we can shift that through this kind of a strategy, that's a really remarkable contribution, in addition to what it means to have education that's high quality and at high standards available to those young people.
A lot of times there are students who don't have that support system for them, and you know, once you start to get involved, even if people aren't family and they support you, you begin to call them family. And with the intergenerational work, you learn from them and, you know, get to work with them, so you see eye to eye on certain issues. And even when you don't, you have a space where you can talk about, well, I don't agree on this, and you feel safe enough to say to an adult, you know, why does it have to be that way?
One of the things that Nolly Jenkins Family Center and Southern Echo and those other organizations do, even NAACP and others do, is we try to create a safe place or teach people about getting involved in the political arena necessarily. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever, but we want to teach people about the roles of government and educate them about what it is that you're to do. So we talk to folks about, you know, the duties and responsibilities of becoming, whether it be a school board member or whatever type of elected official. then we hold ourselves accountable and we hold that person accountable. And once you're sitting in that seat, then we say you're accountable to the people. So they basically, raise up leaders, and that's how it works.
It just means that I have to really reach out to other youth who are not graduating, and so that we could keep the movement alive. I have a little sister who's in Christian school, but I don't think that my mom will be able to afford it any longer, so she'll be in public school next year. And it's just like a cycle. Like, I'm doing this not just for me, but for the future, because in the end of the day, most likely I won't be able to see the change that I'm making, but the people to come will, and the students to come will, so that's basically why I still do it.
When community groups are at the table in education reform deliberations, the process becomes democratic. You have engaged in the process of shaping these public institutions, the very public that owns these institutions, that cares about these institutions. And even though we know that education is a profession and that there's professional knowledge and expert knowledge, schools are also fundamentally democratic institutions, and the idea of engaging everyone in participating in their construction and in their improvement is a fundamental to American democracy.